Welcome everyone to the Symbility self-paced training modules. We've designed our training modules with you, the user, in mind to take control over your learning experience. You can pause the video at any time to give yourself some hands-on practice. In this video, you're going to learn how to navigate the database and build an estimate. Let's get started. Alright, so to begin estimating, we first need to be able to navigate the database. So I've got a floor plan pulled up, and we'll start by applying line items to this floor plan diagram. So the first step is to open the database, and that's this little items tab on the left side of the screen here. This will open the items panel, which is where we'll find all of our database items. So if I click on that little tab, it's going to open. If it's your first time opening the database, it might take a second to load, and that's okay. This tab, notice that when I opened it, the arrows are now pointing a different direction, so it's kind of expandable and collapsible. If I click on items again, it will close it. I want it open, and like a lot of windows that we'll see in Symbility, it's customizable. So notice if I place my cursor right here, this little symbol will allow me to kind of click and drag, and I can kind of adjust how wide it is. Now I would actually recommend to work with it a little bit wider, and that's because I want to be able to see as much detail that's going to be displayed in here when we start looking at line items. So you'll find the right balance for you, but again, it's customizable. What I might do though is my diagram's taking up a lot of my screen, so maybe I'll zoom out just a little bit. Again, you'll find the right balance for you. So I've got my database open. Notice the database that I'm in right here says August 2016, right at that green book. And everything I see in here is listed in different categories. For example, DIY, drywall, ELE, electrical, and everything's listed alphabetically. There are a few different ways you can navigate the database. Just like in other elements within Symbility, how we've seen, in diagramming, for example, there's more than one way to do something. That mindset carries over here for navigating the database as well. There are different ways to get to the same endpoint. The great thing about that is there's not a right way or a wrong way, but a way that will feel right for you. So we'll highlight the different approaches to finding line items in here. One approach is to navigate the database manually. That means I can manually go into the category that I want to explore and choose my line item. So let's use drywall, for example. So I'm going to go into DIY drywall, and to open this category, I double click on it. So I go click, click, and it opens the category. Now it's showing me the available subcategories. So I want to go into ceiling and walls. Click, click, double click opens it. Now I'm seeing all of the available line items, and everything's displayed alphabetically. Before I start looking at any particular line items, I want you to notice this path up here across the top. So we first saw that green book. I said that's our database, that's where we're starting from. And then I went into the drywall category. So I see it right in here, DIY drywall. And then I went into the ceiling and walls subcategory. It's important to watch this path because it's telling you where you are within the database. Okay, it's reminding you how you got to this point. So remember when I showed you how you can kind of make this wider or narrower? Here's one reason why I like to work with it nice and wide, because if it was narrow like this, notice it's cutting off that important information. Especially when you're getting used to working in the MSB database that you see here in Symbility, you'll want to make sure you're paying attention to that path. So again, that's my recommendation, to work with this a little bit wider. It just helps you know where you are within the database. I'm in the drywall category, and I'm in the ceiling and walls subcategory. So let's say I'm looking for drywall, wall, 1/2 inch taped. So I start looking through this list, and notice I'm seeing drywall ceiling, and that's because everything's listed alphabetically. So if I keep going, I see drywall, wall, 1/2 inch taped. When I find that line item and I click on it, there are a few things I'd like you to be aware of that are happening. When I click on an item, it kind of expands and opens it so I can see the available actions, right? So it's kind of expandable. So I click on it, it opens, and it shows me the available actions. I see remove, tear out, and replace. A real common question is, what's the difference between remove and tear out? There's a subtle price difference, right? But beyond the price difference, it really has to do with the level of care that's going into something. For example, if you need to get rid of some wallpaper, but you're not going to be touching the drywall behind that wallpaper, you're going to put a little bit more care into that process. So you'd use remove. Whereas tear out, you're just ripping everything out. You're going to use a little bit less care. Keep in mind, depending on what kind of work you're doing, if you're working for a particular carrier or anything like that, there may be certain expectations in terms of what they'd want you to use. But again, that's really the difference. Price difference and a difference in the level of care that's going into that process. So we see our actions. The other area that I want you to notice is this area down here. This little light blue box down here is called the information box. And the reason it's so important is it's going to tell you exactly what's included in that line item. This area is expandable, so I can kind of drag this up. If there was more information that wasn't being displayed, you can always open it a little bit more. And it's really important to read that information. Keep in mind, folks, that the MSB database that Symbility uses is component-based. That means things are not automatically bundled together. And a way to think of this is think of like an a la carte menu, right? So you go to a restaurant and you sit down and you have to order a la carte. So you choose your salad or your soup and your meal and dessert, and you have to piece all these things together to make a complete meal. That's like the MSB database here. And again, this information box will tell you what you're getting as part of your meal. Okay, so you need to look there to see exactly what's included. Once you've navigated to your line item, you've looked at your information box, I'm ready to select my actions, right? So if I wanted to do remove, I click on it and it's highlighted in blue. But notice if I click on replace now replace is selected, but remove is no longer selected. What if I wanted to do remove and replace at the same time, right? It can be a faster process if you do both remove and replace all at once. So to do that, to select multiple items at the same time, you click on the first one you'd like, you hold down Control on your keyboard. So in the bottom left-hand corner of your keyboard, you should see a button that says CTRL. Hold that down, and when you click on replace, it's enabling you to select both actions at the same time. So I've navigated to these line items manually. I've selected my actions. I've referenced my information box, and I'm ready to apply these items. Remove and replace, drywall, half-inch taped. Now, to apply a line item in Symbility, it's a drag and drop process. What I mean by that is this. I will place my cursor on the selected item. I'm going to hold my click down, and I start to move my mouse. Now, I'll see that red circle with a line through it. That symbol is telling me, don't let go of my click yet. Keep going. So I keep going, and when I drag this to the canvas, I see AW indicating all walls, and notice all of the walls of this diagram are highlighted in orange. What that's telling me is if I were to let go of my click right now, it would apply this item, these items, to every single wall surface in this diagram. So I'm going to make a statement, guys, and I want you to pay close attention to it, okay? I want you to be very cognizant of where your cursor is when you let go of your click, okay? Depending on where your cursor is, that will greatly affect where this item gets applied to. So what I mean by that is this, okay? If I drag it to the canvas, it's going to apply it to every single wall. If I drag this to one particular room, notice just the walls of that room are highlighted in orange. That means if I let go of my click, it's going to apply this item just to the walls of this particular room. If I drag this to one wall, just that particular wall is highlighted in orange, and if I let go of my click, it will apply this item just to that one wall. So again, you need to be cognizant of what your cursor is touching because that will affect where this item gets applied. So I'm going to apply this, let's say, to everything. I'll drag it to the canvas. When I let go, it applies it. Now notice down here, it says 6 line items, and that's because I did remove and replace, and there are 3 rooms in here, so it's getting 6 line items. This is called the line item view, okay? It's a small little panel that's going to help you keep track of what you've just applied. Well, I just did remove and replace, drywall, wall, half-inch taped, to 3 different rooms. That's why it's showing up in here like that. I want to share with you guys, it's not even really a mistake, but it's something I want you to be aware of, okay? Let's see what happens if I accidentally click in the canvas. Okay, so my cursor's hanging out right now in the empty white space, in the canvas, and if I click, what happens? I want you to watch this area in here. So I click, and all of a sudden I went from 6 line items to 0 line items. And the important thing to realize here is sometimes people get a little nervous. They go, oh my God, I just lost all my line items. They're not gone. What happened is there's a connection, there's a correlation between what's selected in your diagram and what's displayed in here. Well, notice when I clicked in the canvas, it deselected all of my rooms. So nothing's selected. That means nothing's displayed over here. What happens when I click on my dining room? Oh, 2 line items are there. What happens if I hold down Control on my keyboard and I also click on the kitchen? Oh, it's seeing those 2 line items there as well. In the living room, oh, I'm back up to 6 line items, okay? So remember the correlation between what's selected in your diagram, that's affecting what's displayed over here in your line item view. And again, your line item view is just there to help you keep track of things. At your estimate view, you'll have access to all of this information and much more. So what I've done so far is I navigated to a line item, I selected my actions, and I applied them by dragging and dropping. Remember this path up here. Green book is the database. Then it takes me to the category and then the subcategories. So I'm in the ceiling and walls subcategory right now, but I want to get back to where I started, back to kind of the general database where I saw all the different categories. Well, this path, I had explained it as a way to keep track of how you got here. It's also going to help you get back to where you came from. So if I click on the green book, that takes me back to my general database where I started from. So far we've seen one approach to navigating the database. We saw that we can manually navigate the database. Another approach to navigating the database is to use some search tools. So we've got a keyword search and a photo search that we'll explore. So the keyword search is this binocular right up here, okay? If I click on it, it's going to trigger a search bar, and I can start searching for line items. Now, I'll say I think navigating the database manually is a very efficient, nice way to go about it if you know where a line item is. But if you're not sure where an item is stored, well, you can use the binocular search, the keyword search, to look for an item. So maybe I want to do some, let's say, I don't know, some carpet. Notice as I start typing, the searches are automatically kicking into gear. So I see a carpet category, and I could double click, and it takes me right in there. Oh, I'm looking for carpet and pad, excellent. So I could go ahead and choose that line item. Remember to always reference your information box, an important step. So I want to go ahead, I'm going to do remove and replace. Remember, I can select both actions at the same time by holding down Control on my keyboard. Now this time I only want to apply this to my living room. So this time I'm going to drag it and drop it just in my living room. And now I see in the living room I've applied 4 line items because I've got the drywall from before, and now I've added that carpet and pad. Again, we've got our little path up here, but if I want to get back to the beginning, I'll click on the green book. Now, another thing to be aware of with your binocular search, you want to be specific, okay? The more specific you are in your search terms, the more refined results you're going to get. So keep in mind, it will be a lot easier to look through 10 results than to look through 100 results. So the more specific you are in your search criteria, the more specific results you're going to get. So another element to be aware of while you're using the keyword search, I'm going to use mahogany as my example. Maybe I'm looking for some mahogany flooring. So I start to type in mahogany, and it's going to find these results. Now, something I want you to be aware of is this bracketed information in here. Okay, the bracketed information is really important because it can help you learn for future times when you're using the database. So what I mean by that is, yeah, you could use the keyword search and just kind of take it at face value. It's spitting out a line item for you. But if you look at that bracketed information, it's telling you where this item is actually stored within the database. That means next time you come here, you have a choice. You could use the keyword search, or you know exactly where this item's stored. It's stored in the floor covering category and the wood subcategory. That means you could go navigate to it manually. So again, Using that bracketed information will just give you a better understanding of how things are organized and stored within the database. So it's an important thing to be aware of. Look at that bracketed information so you know where things are stored. And really that's another reason why we talked about working a little bit wider in here rather than narrower. Notice if I go in a little bit narrower, it's cutting off all of that valuable information, okay? So I'm here, I've got some mahogany flooring displayed. Maybe I'll go ahead and I'll apply this to, let's say, the dining room. All right, remember if you click back on that green book, it takes you back to your starting point. So I've seen the manual navigation. We've seen the keyword search with the binoculars. We'll also take a look at the photo search. So I'll just go in and it's this little icon right in here. Notice when I place my cursor on it, I see hover text pop open that says, oh, browse categories with the photo search. So browse categories by picture. Just a little side note, guys, if you see some different icons up here, again, every company's kind of configured a little differently, but generally you should see roughly the same things. So I'm going to go into the photo search and you'll see all these different pictures broken down here. Really the way the photo search works is it's another way to approach categories. So, let me go into, let's say, the kitchen. So I'll double click on that little picture. This is another instance why it's nice to work a little bit wider so you can see more of that photo. So the way the photo search works is this. If I click on the floor, it's going to show me the categories related to flooring. If I click on a cabinet, for example, it's going to show me a category related to cabinetry. So, I've already done a wall item, I've done a floor item. Let's take a look at a ceiling item. So I click on the ceiling, and it's going to show me the categories related to ceilings. So I'm going to go into drywall, ceiling, and walls. And I'm here in this category. I'm in the ceiling and walls subcategory. And I want you to just take a second and look at this path. Green book, general database, to the drywall category, to the ceiling and walls subcategory. I want you to think about this path. We were here just a few minutes ago. The first example we showed you with navigating the database manually, we were here. But think about it, we approached this from a different approach, right? So I got here in a different way. And just keep in mind there's more than one way to get to the same endpoint. So here I am looking for a ceiling item. Maybe I'll go into drywall, ceiling, 5/8 inch taped. I select my actions, remove and replace, and this one I want to apply to everything. So I'm going to go in, I'll drag it to the canvas, and this time I see AC, all ceilings, and I know if I let go right now, it's going to apply it to all the ceiling surfaces in this diagram. Okay, so we've seen how to apply some line items to a floor plan. Let's go through the same process with a roof plan and with an exterior plan. So if I come over to my Claim Explorer and I navigate to a roof plan, I'll kind of pick up here. So let me get back to my general database, and we know we'll get there by clicking on the green book. And if you scroll all the way down, remember everything's alphabetical, I see a roofing category in here. So if I double click on roofing, it's going to take me to the roofing category, and look at all these different subcategories that are available in roofing. Really, guys, it's a matter of time. The more you explore the database and the more estimates you write, the more things will start to fall into place for you. So if I go into the shingles subcategory, remember to watch that path, I can come in and I can choose my item. Remember, it's very important to reference your information box. We'll select our items. Maybe this time I'll do tear out and replace. Remember, holding down Control is what's enabling you to select both actions at once. And same concept that we talked about in applying an item to a floor plan, we need to be cognizant of what our cursor is touching, because that will affect how this item gets applied. So if I drag this to the canvas, it says A pan, and notice all of the panels within this roof are selected. So if I were to let go of my click right now, it's going to apply this to everything. But if I come in and I just drag this to one slope, it's going to apply it just to that particular slope. If I drag this to the ridge line, it would apply it just to this shape, okay? Have you guys noticed maybe that there's a compass in the top left-hand corner? If I drag this item to the E on the compass, it would apply this to all east-facing slopes. If I drag it to the W, it's going to apply it to all west-facing slopes, etc. In this example, I'm going to apply it to everything, so I'm going to drag it to the canvas. And it's saying 6 line items down here. Why is it getting 6 line items? I did tear out and replace to this one roof. Well, each roof shape is seen as its own kind of room almost. So I've got 3 shapes in here. I've got the main gable, and then I've got 2 gable dormers. So that's why the system's picking up 6 line items. At this point, it's okay that things are broken down. The fact that things are kind of broken down into individual shapes gives you a little bit more flexibility here while you're estimating. In the next module, we'll talk about how to review an estimate. And at your estimate view, you'll see that everything is brought together under one roof shape. So again, here, it's okay that things are broken out into individual shapes and we see the same items 6 times. That's okay. What if I wanted to do another roofing item? Well, maybe I'll go back into the roofing category. So notice I used that path to take 1 step back out. Maybe I want to go into some accessories. I'm looking for some felt, so I choose the item, I'll go in and replace it, and I can continue estimating that way. Okay, so it should feel pretty similar to applying items to a floor plan, just a few nuances to working with a roof plan. I'll do the same thing for an exterior plan. I'll come over to my Claim Explorer and I'll click on Exterior Plan, and I see this 3D exterior that we had created in our Diagramming Exteriors module. So here I've got my 3D exterior. Now, applying items to a 3D exterior will feel pretty similar to what we just saw with a floor plan and a roof plan, but the nuances of applying items to a 3D exterior is this, that when you're in a 3D exterior, you're always in a constant form of 3D rotation, okay? So that means I can't see all of the sides at the same time. Just because I can't see all of the sides at the same time doesn't mean I can't maximize the number of sides that I can see. So what I personally like to do, I like to rotate this so it's at an angle so I can maximize the number of sides that I'm seeing rather than only seeing something straight on. So I rotate it so I can see it at an angle and I can see multiple sides. And I'll come back here. I'm going to go into my siding category. I'll choose some vinyl siding. I come in here, I select my item. Remember to always look at your information box. You select your actions. When you drag it to the canvas, it's going to apply it to everything. Same thing we saw as in roofing. We've got the compass, so you could apply it to all east-facing elevations or all south-facing elevations, but of course I'd like to apply it to everything. So I'll drag it and drop it into the canvas. All right, guys, so we've seen how to navigate the database manually with the keyword binocular search and with the photo search. You've also seen how to apply line items to a floor plan, a roof plan, and an exterior plan. Very similar, but each one kind of has their own nuances to work with. So that's kind of a basic overview. I think you have a nice understanding of how those elements work together, but there are a few other things about estimating we'd like to go over. So I'm going to hop back over to my floor plan and we'll talk about a few things. So let me just zoom out a little bit so I can kind of have some space to work with in here. What about changing the quantity of something? I'm going to use, I'm going to use something electrical as my example for this. I'm going to go into switches and outlets, and I'm looking for an outlet receptacle cover. And I'm just going to choose this action in here, remove and reset. So this is an item that's measured by each unit. And when I drag and drop this, do you see that text that says 1 each? So by default, it's going to apply 1. But if I wanted to change the quantity, that red text that I see in there, I can change it very quickly using that red text. When I let go of my click, I'll have 5 seconds to click on that red text. When I click on the red text, it will allow me to change the quantity. And keep in mind, it's only there for 5 seconds. If you miss those 5 seconds, don't worry, there's another way we can change the quantity. So I'll come in here and I let go and I'll click on that text, and now I see I can go in and change the quantity. The large arrows in here will actually increase or decrease by counts of 10. So it went from 1 to 11. The small arrows will adjust it by individual units. So if I wanted 6 electrical outlets in here, I could go ahead and adjust that. I click on that green arrow and that locks that in, and you can see down here, if I look at my line item view, remember this little panel down here? This is kind of a fast way for me to keep track of what's been applied. I can see remove and reset outlet cover, 6 each. So I successfully changed the quantity. But remember, if you missed that red text, that's okay. You can always come down here. You come down to your line item view, you find your item, and you can right click on it, and there's properties. When I go into the properties, you'll see quantity right in here, and you can make an adjustment. Now the quantities field in here, this is calculable. That means I could type in an equation and it could do the math for me. Okay, so again, there's more than one way to change your quantity. Other things you could change in here, you've got your unit price tab, comment. What this is, let me show you that on another item actually. I'll click on yes, it's going to change that. Remember I changed it from 6 to 7. That change is reflected in here. Let me go into the properties here so I can show you the comment. The comment is actually that information box. So remember that thing I said was so important, all that information? So if you needed to go back and reference that comment, you can choose to make that comment a note. If I select that, it will become a note and it will show up in my estimate. All right, so we've taken a look at changing the quantity and we saw the item properties. Now, navigating the database manually or with your binocular search or your photo search, those are great ways to navigate the database. But there are some tools that will help you do things efficiently, okay? So one of these tools is a favorites list. So let's say something like drywall. Remember in my dining room, I have my dining room selected over here. And that means what I'm seeing over in my line item view down here is a reflection of all the items that I've applied to the dining room. And the very first thing I applied was drywall. So drywall is really common. If there's something that you use all the time, putting it in your favorites list can be a time saver because you don't have to go searching for it every single time. It's right there waiting for you in your favorites list. So how do I add something to my favorites? I'll select my actions. So remove and replace drywall, wall 1/2 inch taped. I'm going to right click, and the very first option says add to favorites. So I added it to my favorites, but where do I find my favorites list? That is this little box right up here. And when I turn on my favorites list, I see, I just added drywall, wall 1/2 inch taped, and drywall, wall 1/2 inch taped, one's remove, one's replace, okay? So there's no limit to what you can add here. You can add as many items as you want. If there's something you think you don't want anymore, you can always select it and delete it right from here, or you could right click on something and remove it from your favorites. You're always in control over what's displayed in there. So if I wanted to get back to where I started, back to my general categories, up until now, we've talked about always clicking on the green book. Well, at this point, I don't see a green book anymore. So where did that go? Notice the star icon up here. It kind of has a little highlight around it. That's a visual indicator telling me that this is a toggle feature. A toggle feature means that one click on it turns it on, a second click on it turns it off. So right now, my favorites list is toggled on. It's turned on. If I click on it again, it turns it off, and now I see that green book again. So just kind of be aware that some of these little icons up here are toggle features. Again, one click turns it on, a second click on it turns it off. A recommendation for your favorites. Okay, as I said, there's no limit to what you can add in there, but use your own discretion, because if your favorites list gets so long, it might take you longer to look through your favorites list as it would for you to just go search the database. I do think there are two extremes that lend themselves well to the favorites. So one we already mentioned, something like drywall, something that's very, very common, throw it in your favorites list, that's great. But I think even more importantly, the other extreme, if there's something that you don't use very often, but the few times you do need it, you have to come to the database and you can never quite figure out where it is, you're always searching around, that's the perfect scenario, the perfect time to throw something into your favorites list. So again, those two extremes probably lend themselves well, but it's up to you to figure out what approach works best for you for managing that favorites list. Remember we talked about how Symbility uses the MSB database, and the MSB database is component-based. Things are broken out into individual components. They're not automatically bundled together. So if that's new to you, that's okay. It may take a little time to get used to it, but there is a tool that will allow you to group things together, to bundle things. So if there are certain items that you always apply at the same time, well, you can bundle them together in a tool we call batches. You might be used to that being called macros, but essentially it's the same functionality. So to the right of the little star icon, which was our favorites, we've got a little white box. So I'll click on it, and notice there's already a training batch in there, but you can create as many batches as you'd like, okay? The more batches you create, the longer this list will become. So maybe you have like a painting batch and a drywall batch and a plumbing batch and different kinds of roofing batches. The more effort you put in on the front end to creating batches and managing them, the more time it will save you in the future, okay? So it's something, again, that might take a little bit of work on the front end, but it's gonna be a time saver down the road. So we'll look at a few things in terms of batches. We're going to look at how to create a batch, how to add items to a batch, and then how to apply the batch. So let's use our dining room for an example, or maybe our living room. So I click on the living room, and we know that down here in our line item view, it's showing us all of the items that we've applied to the living room. So if I want to say, okay, I want to create a batch off of all of these items, what I can do is there's a little button down here that says all. When I click on it, it's going to select all of the items that have been applied to the living room. And when I right click, I see some options up here that say add to new item batch or add to item batch. The difference here is add to item batch is you're adding it to an existing batch. Well, I want to create a brand new batch, so I'm going to go to add to new item batch. Because it's a new item batch, it's going to ask me for a name. So I'm just going to call this living room. I hit OK, and it created the batch, and it added all the items that I had selected all in one fell swoop. If I come in here and I double click on living room, I see all those items that I had added to my living room, okay? And these will be here in any claim you work. So if you work a claim later today or next week, you'll have all of these items already grouped together in one batch. Now, if you wanted to add items later on, you can always come down here, whatever room you select. If I wanted to choose something from my dining room, and I say, okay, well, you know what, this should also be in that living room batch, I can go add it just like this, and you'll see that item appear now, and you have access to it from every claim. So we've seen how to create a batch, how to add items to the batch. How about applying a batch? Now, there are a few different ways you could look at this. So if I take one step out here, remember these little paths kind of help you navigate within your database? So right now I'm looking at the living room batch, but I want to take one step out, back out to kind of my general item batches area. And I see the training batch that was already in there, and then this is the one that we just created. So let's say I'm working in a new claim and I want to apply this living room batch. So one scenario is this. If I know I want everything that's in there, I don't even have to open it. I can simply grab this, hold my click down, drag it to a room, and when I let go, it would apply every single item from within that batch to this new room, all in one fell swoop. But what if I'm not sure if I want everything, or I want everything except one item or two items? Well, you can open it, you double click on it and it opens. And I can look through here and I can see, oh yeah, you know what, I want all of this except this one. So what I would do is I would click on all, and then I simply hold down Control and click on the one you don't want, or maybe there's two you don't want. And now when you drag this and drop it, it's going to apply everything except the one or two that you had deselected. Okay, so it's always a matter of, well, what's going to be the approach that helps me do this efficiently? How can I do this in as few steps as possible? So again, Batches are great because it's allowing you to bundle things together and allowing you to apply many items in one foul swoop. It does take a little bit of work to get there, but if you take the time to create your batches, it'll save you a lot of time in the future. So I think batches will be a really great tool in terms of helping you do things efficiently. Notice batches up here, the little box, this is a toggle feature. So if you don't see the green book right now, that's okay. We know toggle features, one click turns it on, second click turns it off. So if I click on the box again, it turns it off, and now I'm back at my general categories. So kind of taking batches to the next step, the next level, we have a newer tool called Assemblies. Assemblies are great because it's really the only way to be estimating without spending a lot of time really having to navigate the database. It's kind of a question and answer approach to estimating. So for example, I'll go ahead and I'll click on Assemblies. And I see all these different kinds of assemblies: asphalt roofing, cabinetry, decks, fencing, contents, all these different kinds of assemblies. So different kind of question and answer forms. Well, I see in our kitchen over here that I've got some cabinetry. So if I drag this cabinetry assembly right into the kitchen, a new window will load. And what it is, it's some questions that I have to take a moment and answer. So I'll come in here and I'll select the room type. It's a kitchen. Now notice, because I'm selecting kitchen, that's dictating what kind of questions it asks me here. If I had chosen bathroom, it would ask me some questions specifically related to cabinetry found in the bathroom. So the form that we're filling in will kind of change on us as we fill in some answers. So I'm going to select the damage severity. We are doing a replacement. Select cabinet type. We're going to do lower and upper. Selecting age, so that means it's going to depreciate for me. Then we're going to say, oh, this is a very good cabinet for cabinet grade. Yeah, we'll leave it at remove and reset. So I'm just going in here and entering some details that I need to fill in. So let's say tear out and replace, that's 9 feet for our lower cabinet. We'll say down here this will be tear out and replace 6 feet. Granite countertops, very good. We're going to remove and reset, let's say, a dishwasher and a refrigerator. We'll say it's about 2 hours of labor, and we need a 5-yard dumpster. So when you're all done answering these questions, we click next and generate. It's going to take a second to kind of think about it. And it's going to say, okay, based off of the answers that you provided, here are all the line items that you need in order to do that work. Notice everything in here has a check mark. Okay, so if I were to hit apply, it would apply this to everything. So it would apply all of these items. Now, if there's something you don't want, you could say, nah, don't include that item. So you just take that little check mark away. Now, what if there's something that it's including, but you think, no, I don't want, cabinet base, very good, it's supposed to be a different grade, or it's close, but it's not quite right. There are two different things you could do here. One is there's a previous button, so that would take you back to the question form, and you can go change your answer if you want. The other thing you can do is go to replace with, and if I click on that, it's going to say, oh, well, maybe you meant to include cabinet base excellent, or cabinet base very good, or economy. And so you can go in and change something this way. Now, if I were to click apply, again, it would apply all of those items right there. So, again, assemblies are a really nice approach if you don't need to be spending your time in the database. It's the question and answer approach. So we've seen, navigating the database manually, photo search, keyword search. We've seen tools to help you do things more efficiently, like your favorites and your batches and your assemblies. But everything has been based off of a diagram, and that's really the way Symbility was designed. If you spend your time diagramming correctly, your estimate will start to build itself, okay? There is one tool that's available, so you can apply items without a diagram, and that's the general items. Now keep in mind, most companies' workflows will expect a diagram, but again, that's kind of per company. But just so you see, there is an option to apply items that's not diagram specific. and that's this general items guy. And this is available whether you're in a floor plan, a roof plan, an exterior plan. It's always there. So if I click on it and I come into the canvas and I click, it's going to drop a general items box on there, and it has the name general items. I could change it or I could leave it. I'm going to leave it at general items. You could always right click on it and rename. The general items bin is great for things that, you know, aren't specific to a room or aren't specific to a floor plan. Things like permits and fees or dumpsters. You know, they're more claim specific or related to the overall claim. So a general items bin is a really nice place for that. So let me turn off Assemblies, and maybe I'll use my binocular search to go look for, how about a dumpster? You find your item, you drag it in there, and now my general items bin is holding my dumpster, my permits and fees, etc. If you're using it for other things, just be aware you can right click and you can go into properties to set some specific dimensions and those kinds of things. But it is a nice tool to be aware of in there if you need to be estimating without a diagram. Thanks for joining us as we learned how to navigate the database and build an estimate. Make sure you check out the next training module where we learn how to review an estimate.